presenting today. I had somebody had to reschedule, so I really do appreciate you all helping us out here. We have been doing things in person and on Zoom, kind of the hybrid approach. Given that we've had pretty low attendance, I think the most I've had in person is 5 people. So then with coming up, I thought maybe pause that for a bit. So in December, if anybody had great ideas of coming on site, because I'm thinking I'll pause that for a couple of months, and then we can regroup in the spring and see how that. So in December, Novia Nichols, who is one of our mediators and very involved in the mental health community, she's going to present on using mediation to promote health recovery. January 3rd, that'll be right after the new year, and the will still sort of be ongoing. So there's not going to be a session in January. Then in February, that will also not be on site. Belinda's going to present and review some just basic mediation techniques. March 6th, we have Molly Rands, who is the director of the Michigan Bar Association Lawyers and Justice Assistance Program, and she will be presenting on compassion, fatigue, and burnout. And then on April 3rd, a session on de-escalation by Charday and Kyoko, or Carolyn, can you help me with the pronunciation of her last name? She gave up an all-day session here recently that some of you may have attended, but she's going to give us a presentation on de-escalation techniques to use in mediations and circles. So I did want, and then May is still to be determined. But I did just want to share that with you all as, you know, we're changing from the hybrid to back to on Zoom. Hi, Kevin. Kevin has just joined us.
Hi.
Well, welcome again to you all. I'm so glad that everyone is here, and I will turn it over to Carolyn and Kyoko, who are going to lead us through a discussion on reflective listening. Take it away, Carolyn and Kyoko.
Hi, thank you. So we're going to be going over the reflective listening, but looking at it through the lens of the model that is used primarily in Maryland right now. And Kyoko is going to provide some support around that, and also some perspective when it comes from the NVC form of listening, which is nonviolent communication. And I think there's a few folks here that are familiar with NVC. Is that right? Okay, yeah. All right, so I'm going to bring up my screen and hopefully it will share. Let's see if it'll work. Do you want to say hi, Kyoko?
Sure, while sharing, hello everyone, it's good to see you, and it will be supportive for us if you could turn on the camera. No pressure, but that would be supportive, just to see the faces. Thank you.
Okay. What, are you screen sharing right now? Oh, good.
Just got it.
I was getting nervous. I thought it might be an Al issue.
Okay, can everyone see that? Is that showing up for folks? Yeah, okay, good. So most of us are familiar with reflective listening and what that looks like. Inclusive listening is not that different. It's just has a little bit more rigidity around what the words are and how do we make sure that we're removing our biases and our prejudices when we're giving our reflections, right? And I think that this is one of the areas where folks tend to struggle the most, right? Especially folks who've been doing this for a long time. I know that it's a practice that if I don't keep up with it, I start slipping into some of those same behaviors, right? Some of my biases will start coming through in my reflections. And recently I was able to practice this with a volunteer one-on-one. We were working on it together. And it was wonderful for me to really realize, like, oh, I need to get back into practicing this more often, because these things slip in, right? And what I thought was a bias is no longer a bias, but now I have a new one, and now I have to keep that in mind when I'm giving reflections. So no matter where you are in your journey as a mediator or a facilitator, practicing your reflective listening is always going to be a benefit. So as I mentioned here, the inclusive listening method that I'm going to be going over more today is primarily used in Maryland. It was put together by the organization, a nonprofit called Community Mediation Maryland, and they do a lot of training and support for community mediation centers throughout the state of Maryland. And they've also gone to some other parts of the US and done trainings there as well. There are some similarities to nonviolent communication, which I'll be referring to as NVC. And the basis for it is using feelings, values, and topics. I'll talk more about that later. None of that is going to be different than what you've heard in any of your other trainings around reflective listening. As we know, the role of our role when we're walking into that room is to try to listen and reflect with as little bias as possible. In mediation, we're doing a lot of reflecting, right? Folks are saying things, we're reflecting, making sure that we're understanding, but also that everyone in the room is getting a similar understanding of what's going on. In circles, we use the reflective listening a little bit differently. We use it more in intake when we're really trying to understand where are people coming from, what's important to them, but also we use it in a similar way to mediators. When we get to the agreement portion, we want to keep in mind what are the values that people really need, what is important to them around the topics, and that leads into making sure that we have an agreement that meets the needs of everyone involved. And that's one of the benefits of really practicing this reflective listening, is that it can improve not only your ability to remove your biases and prejudices, but also improve your ability to make an agreement that is going to fit the needs of the participants. Okay. So in the inclusive listening method, there are 3 parts to every reflection: feelings, values, and topics. Values in other forms of reflective listening are sometimes called needs or interests or issues. In Maryland, they had long discussions about why they wanted to use the word values instead of these other words, right? And I think the one I remember that stuck with me was they were like, we're not going to use issue because a lot of times, you know, we might say, what's your issue? And that's kind of, that's a, you know, it seems like hostile when you say, what's your issue? So removing that language that could be misinterpreted and using the word values instead is just another way to kind of remove the possibility of creating more conflict rather than less. And it also helps us in our brains keep in mind that we're not really trying to focus on their issue, but rather what do they need? What is their value here? When we look at, so now I'm gonna go into each piece individually. And then at the end of all this, I have a paragraph written out, and I'm going to have us just practice picking out some feelings and values. So one of the things, I'm going to put this in the chat real quick. There are a couple places that you can look online. And hopefully I got the chat up. Yeah. So this is a great place to just grab feelings. I like to actually keep a list of feelings next to me when I'm facilitating or when I'm mediating sometimes, because it can be helpful to just, I'm thinking of a word, but it doesn't quite fit, and sometimes just looking at a list of words can help me think of other words that might be better. So it doesn't have to be like I have to pick these words, right? But it can just kind of help jog your memory or make you think of other things. And then likewise, when we get to values, I'll go ahead and put that in the chat for you too. This is just one list of values. And as you can imagine, there are lots of different feelings, lots of different values. Neither of these lists is complete. So you can make your own lists, add to it, take off words that don't really fit with you, whatever you need. Okay, let me try to bring this back up to big. Okay. Any reactions before I keep going? Anything that folks want to say? And I can't really see everyone, so if you do have something, just go ahead and unmute. Okay. So when it comes to feelings, we want to make sure that we're tying each feeling to some topic or some value that the participant has. Doesn't mean you need to do this right away. And that's something that as you build your skills, you'll start to get more of that. But try to think of feelings as so let me put it this way. It's easy to confuse a value for a feeling. And this happens a lot in our practice. One way to avoid that is to take out the words. You just say, it sounds like you're feeling, and then enter the feeling. Take out the word like. Don't put that in there. So not you're feeling like this, you're just feeling this. And that can help remove a lot of those values or other words that aren't actually feelings, but are your interpretation of what's going on. And that's a good tip for yourself as well. If you're trying to express to other people how you're feeling, take out the word like. And it forces you to be a little bit more specific about the feeling you're actually having. Nice thing about reflecting feelings is that a lot of times when folks are repeating themselves, or when folks are starting to get more angry, or just more emotional, reflecting the proper feeling to them at the proper level for them can help them both feel heard and also help them not continue going into that spiral of anger or heatedness. And it can help people bring folks back down to a level where we can hear each other again. Looking at values, when you're identifying values for folks, make sure they're tied to a topic. And let me go forward a little bit because I keep saying that these things need to be tied to a topic, right? And what I mean by that is it's something like this. When I'm taking notes in mediation or in intake or anything like that, I have my participant 1 on one side, participant 2 on the other side if they're both there, right? And when I'm looking at the topics should be shared between both. That should be the same for everyone. But there should be specific values around that topic for each participant. And they should be different values. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in conflict, right? There may be shared values around a topic, but if they're here and they're in conflict, something is different. And that's what we have to identify. What are the different values there? And then around each of those values, what are the feelings around those values? Sometimes when folks are saying a feeling, it can highlight a value that they feel is missing, right? So I'm feeling disrespected. The value that they might need in this situation is respect. And so you could say value would be respect, feeling would be they're feeling disrespected, they're feeling unheard, whatever it is that ties to that. Okay. So that's what I mean when I say that each value should be tied to a topic. If you're identifying something that's important to them, that's a clue that that has to be around a specific topic. And it is easy to confuse values for topics, so be careful. And it's also really easy for us to let our biases get in the way here. Because we might hear someone saying things and we're like, oh, they are really annoyed. They must want this person to just put in the work. Hard work must be a value for them. And really what they're saying is it's not so much the hard work, it's the cleanliness. So the important piece is making sure that when we're picking these feelings and we're picking these values, that we're using words that they've actually said to inform those feelings and values, and not what we think we might be hearing. And this is something that's going to be difficult throughout the course of your work as a mediator or a facilitator, right? We always tend to fall back into the comfort of making assumptions because that's what we do as humans. It's easy. Forcing ourselves to identify what did they actually say that points to that feeling or points to that value, that's the difficult work. Oh, before I go forward, I do want to point out, now that I've said all that, right, that values can be confused for topics and so forth. There are also some values that can be feelings and vice versa, right? For example, love. That's a feeling, and it could be that that is a feeling that someone is expressing at the moment. It could also be a value that's important to them. So maybe they're not expressing it, but maybe the value is love and they need to have that in some way. So maybe they want, love is important to them and they're feeling ignored or they're feeling unloved or whatever it is, right? So now that I've said that these are all clear feeling, value, topic, separate things, there's also a lot of wiggle room and things kind of get muddled up together, and that's okay. This isn't meant to be perfect.
Hey, Carolyn, this is Gail.
Yeah.
Hey, so could you put the presentation in the chat for folks?
Oh, yes.
I would do it, but I get all screwed up on the owl thing here. Not Al Raymond, the owl that we're using.
Oh, Al, we know it's you. When you say put the presentation in the chat, what do you mean?
I
Like
mean, like just
the
copy
file?
it. Yeah, or I could just send it out later. I was thinking, I'll just send it out afterwards.
Okay, I think I
Okay.
can. Let me try real quick. If this doesn't work, then I won't keep trying.
We're gonna blame it on Al. He's feeling like we're blaming everything.
You know, I'm sure they didn't. Lest the record show, I drove 12 miles because I was promised cookies and there are no cookies.
I did not mention anything about cookies.
Okay.
I said snacks.
Well, snacks.
Well, and these
Bring your own
qualify
lunch.
snacks, yeah.
In the old days when
Oh,
Oh,
we had a bowl where you could put $5 in and then take cookies.
yeah.
oh. All right.
That's all
All
right.
Yeah.
I'll send it afterwards.
Okay. All right.
Sorry about
Actually, no, that's okay. I think I actually just did it. So now I'm going to bring it back up. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that works.
Couldn't practice on prime time.
Okay. And so I did put it into the chat. If you're able to download that, go ahead. It is as it's a Microsoft file, PowerPoint file. So if you're unable to open up Microsoft Office files, then that might not show up for you. But I could send you a PDF of it also, Gail, later on.
Thank you.
So the topics, this is, for me, this is the area that I struggle with the most. And a lot of people have a similar struggle with topics because it is so easy to put in a value or to put in something that one person has been especially fervent about saying, like, this is the topic, this is what we need to talk about, right? And the thing is, when you go through, when you're trying to identify a topic, you do need to make sure that it's something that everyone in the room can agree to. And so, for example, the one I like to use is if you've got two roommates, right? One of them might be an art student that does work with recycled products. And you've got another person who will just say they're an engineering student or something, and they don't do projects like that. So the discussion might be about trash in the living room, right? And the engineer's like, there's trash all over the place, and this place is messy, and just got to pick up the trash or do something with it and put it somewhere where it's not going to be in the way. And the other person might be like, well, what do you mean the trash? It's all my supplies for my art, and like this trash does not need to just be like in a box. It have to be able to use it, so forth, so forth. You might be tempted to put the word trash as the topic. However, that would be something that the art student might respond to, like, it's not trash, it's my art supplies, right? And if you call it art supplies, the other person is going to say, that's not art supplies, it's trash, and it's in my living room. So the actual topic in that might be shared living space, right? Or shared space, or just living room, something like that. Because they both agree it's about the living room. What they're calling it could be something else. So Community Mediation Maryland came up with this topics grinder. And the idea is, if you have an idea for a topic, go through each of these steps here and make sure that it fits this. If it doesn't, you have to find something else. Generally, you only want a topic to be 1 or 2 words. Once you start adding more words, it starts getting more complicated, and chances are you're putting someone's idea or something else in there. A topic should be something that has been talked about and people are having conflict around that thing. So in the example I used, they're having conflict around the living room and that shared space, and what they call the stuff that's in the living room, that's something else. But they both agree that it's about the shared living space. It is something specific or concrete. So shared living space or living room, that's pretty specific. It does not blame anyone. So again, if you call it trash, that's blaming the art student. And if you call it art supplies, then that's kind of taking the side of the art student. So it does not blame anyone, does not take anyone's side. And it does not set up a yes, someone should, or no, someone shouldn't. So for example, cleanliness would not be a good topic there, because that's going to say someone needs to do something here or someone does not need to do something here. It also takes someone's side, right? So some examples for topics might be like lawn or shared spaces or visitors, clothing, bills, food, that sort of stuff. I will say communication comes up a lot as a topic, and we have to be really careful when we want to use that as a topic, because they're here in mediation or they're here in circle. Clearly something's happening with communication that isn't working. So this is where you need to start thinking about chunking up or chunking down on those topics. And by that, I mean communication might be a topic, but maybe you have to listen. Are they talking about communication in general, or are they talking about different kinds of communication? So are they talking about communication with children, or communication with the school, or are they talking about the language that they use? What is it specifically that they're talking about around communication? And you might need to be more specific. Or maybe they really just want to talk about that as a general topic, and it's okay to be general then. But you have to really make sure that it's fitting what they're talking about and not just what seems easier for you. Okay. Any questions about those 3 pieces? Or any comments that folks want to put out there? Because y'all have been doing this for, some of you have been doing this for a long time. I'm going to try to flip through real quick. Okay, I don't see anyone raising hands, so I'm going to keep going. Feel free to jump in if you want to, though. So this is something y'all are familiar with as well, the reflection sandwich, right? And I think I've seen this in pretty much every form of reflective listening that I've seen taught. You always start with some kind of entry phrase. It sounds like, what I'm hearing is. The specific wording doesn't matter as long as you're showing that you are attempting to understand, and that you're not, you're setting this up to be a question, and you're setting it up so that the person you're speaking to can reply with whatever is correct to them. Then you say the specifics, the feelings, the values, the topics. I always say it's great if you can throw all three of those together into one reflection, because that just sounds really awesome and cool. But you don't have to do that. If all you've been managed to pick out is a feeling, just do the feeling. If all you've managed to pick out is a value, just do the value. That's fine. What's important is that you're actually showing that you're trying to listen, and you're giving them a chance to respond with whether or not that fits with what they are feeling or not, or what they're saying. So then the important part is always include that question at the end. Is that right? Did I understand that correctly? Whatever seems natural for you, throw that in there. And I'm going to put an asterisk on that. As you all know, whenever we start doing reflections, it does not feel natural at first, right? When we first start doing this, it feels really weird. But as you do it some more, you start to find language that fits more with how you want to speak or how you generally speak, and then it stops feeling quite so weird. So one example would be, it sounds like you're feeling afraid of being penned in, and it's important to you to maintain your independence when it comes to work. Is that right? So it has the entry phrase, it sounds like you're feeling. Then it has the specifics, feeling afraid, penned in, and then the value, independence, and then the topic, work. And then the most important piece, the question at the end, is that right? Sometimes we'll just use tone to indicate a sentence, right? It's important to you to maintain your independence when it comes to work, right? Kind of lift it up at the end to make it a question. And that's okay too. I would be careful about not doing that too much. Make sure that you're throwing in an actual question fairly often, just so that it's super clear to everyone that you're not trying to impose what you're saying onto them. You're really inviting them to respond to you because you want them to. If you didn't get the feeling right, that's important for us to know. If you didn't get that value right, that's super important for us to know. And sometimes you will find a feeling or a value that absolutely fits what they're saying. And they'll say, no, not really. It's actually more of this. And I've had this happen to me where I'm like, no, that is what they're saying. But it doesn't matter what I think they're saying. What's important is what they are saying that they're saying, right? Because we all have different histories with words and with language. And so even though I think that's the perfect word to fit what they're saying as their value, for them, that word doesn't fit. So we use the word that they say fits. And it's okay to use the words that they have said. Sometimes, right, we try to use a different word because we're trying to be more perfect or more correct or whatever. And it's not important. If they've given you a feeling word or they've given you a value word, great. We should use that. That's what they're saying that is important to them or what they're feeling.
Carolyn, this is Gail. Greta had a comment or a question about reflection versus reiteration.
Okay. Can you tell me what you see as reiteration, Greta?
I'm thinking the difference might be, excuse me, I can't see anybody. Oh, well, I'm thinking the difference might be reiteration is more specific and it does use the words that people say, but it's limited to that and perhaps doesn't express, I've heard you and this is in my words what I heard you say. Would that be how you would understand the difference?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that there's room for reiteration and reflective listening as you've described it. I think that the part where it can get tricky is a lot of times folks are saying their solution to a problem. And if we are just reiterating that, then we're not really identifying what's important to them around that piece. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is how I like to manage my notes. When I'm doing that, I'll have one side for one participant, the other for another participant. Gets a little more complicated when you have more participants, but that's okay. They don't need to see my notes. Although I always tell them they can look at my notes. I'm not putting anything in there that they shouldn't see, right? And if I am, yeah, I should check myself. All right. There are some videos here. I'm not going to use those today, but when you get the PowerPoint, feel free to click on those. It's kind of fun to try to do reflective listening to a video because you can pause it, you can rewind it, you can check yourself that way. But it also forces you to try to be a little bit more quick than we might do when we're reading a paragraph. Oh, okay. Now it's not giving me my... Oh. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, I'm going to bring it back up now, hopefully. So I do have a couple paragraphs. So one of the things I want to do with this exercise now is I want us to read the paragraph, identify feelings, values, or topics that you're hearing, and I really want us to point to where in the paragraph does it indicate that feeling or that value. So anytime you come up with one, just tell me, where do you see that in the paragraph and what's indicating that? And what that helps us do is it helps us realize, oh wait, I didn't actually say that. That's just me thinking that, which is great. We want to do that because that means we've identified something that we tend to do. I was doing this with a paragraph. I mentioned I was working with a volunteer one-on-one on this, and we were reading a paragraph where it was about a teacher at a school who was saying, they were basically saying like, oh, well, this kid needs to do this or this or this or this. And I realized I have a bias towards this person because of the way that they were saying something. I wasn't actually hearing what they were saying. I was thinking, oh, they're being too strict or they're being too this or too that. So that was eye-opening for me because I realized that now if I have someone in a mediation or in a circle who's saying things like that, I need to be much more careful and much more cognizant of what I am bringing up as a feeling or value. So this is a great exercise for us to find out where those hidden biases and prejudices might lie. Okay, and it's really fun to find them, I think, anyways. Let's see if I can share. And I'm sure, as you know, right, our biases and our prejudices change over time too, so it's important to kind of keep checking ourselves. Okay. Would anyone be willing to read this out with some oomph, with some emotion?
Could I give it a try?
Yes, please.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right, so this is it has been so miserable.
Okay.
You're a neighbor.
Mm-hmm. It has been so miserable living next door to you and your kids. You are an unhappy, uptight, rude woman, and your kids are out of control. They always leave their toys out on the sidewalk and in front of the doorway. I can't even walk outside my own house without feeling like I'm walking through a minefield. Last week, I almost tripped over some toys that had been left out and almost broke my neck. Then, the other day, they were blocking the entryway with some kind of game they were playing and wouldn't move to let me into my own house. So, I went around them. They need to learn to mind their elders. But what's worse is that right after that, you came up to me screaming about some garbage. I wouldn't even let my and I couldn't even get my groceries in the door. I wasn't about to let you treat me like that. I had to force myself around you to get away from the insanity. Then you call the cops on me and say that I attacked you. Honestly, I don't know how I can continue to live next door to you and your kids. I work late every day. I just want to be able to come home, listen to my music, and relax and forget about all the hateful things in the world for a few hours each night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, what does anyone want to take a stab at picking out some feelings or values or topics here? And go ahead and unmute because I can't see everyone.
I can take a stab at it, Carolyn.
Thank you.
This is Kathy. So the first feeling I have is that she's miserable or very unhappy. Some of the values I picked up was that she values control. She sees the kids out of control. She values respect. She doesn't feel like she's getting respect from the children. And she values quiet and at home. Some of the topics are the toys were lying around blocking her way. The children were not listening. And the police were called saying that she had been attacked.
Okay.
Sorry, she had been the attacker, not she had been attacked. She had
Oh,
attacked
right.
the other woman. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's look at these. Miserable. Where in the language of what this person has said does it tell you that she's miserable?
Fifth word in the paragraph.
Right there. Exactly. Perfect. That's an easy one. Okay. What about unhappy?
It's in the second sentence.
Well, that one says you are unhappy.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
That's a tricky one, though.
I would say she's frustrated.
Okay. What tells you that?
That she can't even walk outside her own house. She almost tripped on toys.
How does that tell you frustrated versus a different feeling?
Oh. That she can't, she can't control it. She can't change it herself.
Okay. So that sounds like the feeling is she feels out of control or she feels helpless, maybe?
Helpless? Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Okay.
it.
So frustrated, I mean, she might actually be frustrated, right? But there's no actual wording here that really says frustrated. That's more of what we're interpreting from what she's saying.
Mm-hmm.
But when you were saying unhappy, is that the word you used?
Well, Kathy did, but
Or what was it?
I forget.
I said unhappy. I'm Lana.
Unhappy, yeah. And so when we look at unhappy, again, what wording specifically points to that? I see Lavana, your hand is up. Go ahead.
She feels disrespected.
Okay. And what points to that?
She says, I wasn't about to let you treat me like that.
Okay.
And, she alluded to elderly before, and she's not treated the way she feels she should be treated, and I say disrespect.
Okay. I think that makes sense. Do
Mhm.
others agree?
Yep.
Yeah, I think those words that she said there, learn to mind your elders, I wasn't about to let you treat me like that. Those all point pretty directly to feeling disrespected. Yeah. Good one. Any others? Yes, go ahead.
No, there is some sense of despair. She's
Okay.
saying, honestly, I don't know how I can continue to live next to you and around your kids. So, it might be frustration, it might be despair, that what else can I do?
Okay. So that's a really good sentence to point to for frustrated as well as for despair. Thank you. So we've got wording there. Honestly, I don't know how I can continue to live next to you. Like, how am I going to do this? That could absolutely be despair. It could be frustration. And this is a really good place where you ask the participants, right, in your reflection. It sounds like you're feeling like desperate or despair around your living situation. Is that right? And they can be like, yes, that's what it is. Right? Or they'll be like, nah, it's not that bad. And then you can take it down to frustrated. Okay. How about for values? Let's look at some of these values. So we've got control, respect, and quiet. So what tells us in here control is something that this person wants?
Well, she says your kids are out of control.
There we go. Oh, here it is. Your kids are out of control.
But can that be more a value of parenting?
That might be more parenting, right? And this is where the question becomes so important, because we might say something like, you said that the kids were out of control. Is it that control of kids is important to you? And they'll be like, no, what do you mean? You can't control kids. I mean, you need to be a better parent or whatever, right? And that gives you then the value that they're really trying to say there. So it could be parenting. Maybe is there anything else in here that will give you some values that are a little bit more like directly what this person is saying?
Say shared space, sure. Privacy.
Privacy. Okay. Which part points to that?
Well, all she wanted was her music.
I just want to be able to come home, listen to my music and relax and forget about all the hateful things in the world for the night. So to me, that doesn't say privacy, but it does point to some other ones. Because she's not saying that she's not saying she wants to be alone while she does that.
I see some compassion in what she's saying, despite her frustration and everything else, because she says, you are an unhappy, uptight, rude woman. And, and at the end, she values that she wants to relax and have some quiet time. And this woman really doesn't have it. So, it can be interpreted in both ways. It's like, you're a horrible woman, but it can also be turned around, and it must be very hard for you because this is how you're presenting yourself.
It could be, right? We would need to ask questions to find out where this person is coming from with that, yeah. And you mentioned quiet being important, and I think you pointed out here I want to be able to come home, listen to my music, and relax and forget all about the hateful things in the world.
Right.
I don't know if quiet really fits because they say they want to listen to music.
Maybe peaceful would be a better word.
Peaceful. Yeah, I think that fits. What do others think?
Relaxation?
Relaxation also, yep, that would fit. So we might say it sounds like having peace and opportunity to relax is really important to you. Mm-hmm.
Mal said unburdened.
Unburdened. Tell me what points to that.
Not having to deal with all those things in the world, the hateful things going on in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like it.
Are we assuming something that she it may have been, never having had children, never having been married, never having a relationship that involved children?
That's a big assumption.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you point that out because that is an assumption that I think a lot of people would make. And this person may have 10 kids. They may just not live with her right now.
Yeah, 10 kids, I know why she moved.
That's why she needs that relaxation and that peace. Okay. So we've got some pretty good, we've got miserable, despair, frustrated, disrespected as feelings, and we pointed to places specifically where that was said. Peace, relaxation, wanting to be unburdened, those were all specifically pointed to. And I was trying to underline where we were getting this, right? We got, and of course she said miserable specifically, so I just highlighted that because that's like a gimme. Perfect. But I'm noticing there's a lot in the middle here that we didn't work with. We didn't pick out any feelings or values there. Does anyone want to try to pick something out from that area?
Phyllis had a comment, and I think Phil also had a comment in the chat. If you want to speak up and share those.
Thank you.
It seemed to me that she's angry about the world's situation, and this is another situation that so I thought maybe angry is another feeling.
Okay. And what specifically does she say that makes you think angry?
That she wants to forget about all the hateful things in the world. And I almost broke my neck.
Okay.
I would say a value there would be safety, possibly.
Safety makes sense. Yep. She clearly says she's worried about breaking her neck, so safety is important. I think anger here, I don't think she specifically says anything that would point to her feeling angry, right? She might be sounding angry, but that, again, is our interpretation of what's being said. And it may be valid. She may actually be angry, so it doesn't mean it's wrong. But she doesn't actually say anything that points to that specifically. You know, forget about all the hateful things in the world for a few hours each night. She might be overwhelmed rather than angry.
She feels vulnerable.
Okay. Yeah, and I think tell me what points to that.
Well, even, you know, with all the how she needs to walk around and it's her physical safety, but everything else, I even and wouldn't even let me get my groceries in the door. So, you know, you're screaming, the garbage, oh, you know, you came up to me screaming about some garbage and wouldn't even let me. So no matter what, so there is a safety physical safety because she's older, but there is also vulnerability that where is it coming from and what else will come?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
All
can
of
see that.
her entire dialogue here relates to the shared space that she has with this other person and that person's children. She has a place of refuge, but she's prevented from attaining it. There's everything that's going on in the shared space is out of control and it's chaotic and she feels it's unsafe. She says all those things. So she's really talking about what's going on. How come I can't get to my refuge?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you prevent me, you and your children prevent me from enjoying my place of refuge. My what did Superman call it? The fortress of solitude.
Yeah, so it could be, so I picked out from what you were saying there, the topic of shared space, the feeling unsafe, and also the value of refuge. I did want to point out, Livana, I think you were speaking just before. You said that she's older. I don't think there's anything here that actually indicates that this person is older.
Except that she says that children ought to respect their elders, so there's
You're right, you're right. That's good, that's good. But we don't know that
Carolyn?
the person is older than the person she's talking to, just that
Yes.
she's older than the children.
Carolyn, is she also like resilient or resourceful? Because in spite of all of the things, she's still brave enough to pen this, you know what I mean? And she's still talking about she went around them. You know, she gives you the stuff that she's been going through. So she says, then, so I went around them.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's trying to give a solution. They
So
need
what,
to learn to mind their elders, yada, yada, yada. And she goes on again.
Yeah, but she talks about going around them as though it's an imposition. She doesn't feel she should have to, only that she did.
mm-hmm. Okay. So I love that you also pointed out there, Lana, that she has a solution already in mind, right? That they need to mind their elders there. But also, Phil, you mentioned imposed upon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could
That's,
see that there. Yep, yep.
she doesn't feel like she should have had to do that, only that she was having been imposed upon, she found a way around. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's resilience, like
Yeah. And Lana, you were saying
Lana said.
resilience and bravery. Where do you think those would go here? Has she expressed that as a feeling? Has she expressed that as a value? Or is that something that we just are seeing interpreting her behavior as?
I interpret it as that. She doesn't exactly say it, but you know, to me, it's like reading, you know, all of these actions that she's performing because she's saying, okay, you're rude, but she's still there and she's
Okay.
finding ways to maneuver around the situation with a solution in mind.
Okay. So that's something that, again, it might be true. She might be feeling brave. She might be acting in a brave way. But she didn't specifically say that. So it doesn't mean we can't use that when we do our reflections. It just means that we need to be aware of the fact that that's something that we're putting on her, not something that she has said. Because she might not feel brave at all. She might feel like this is just terrible. There's no bravery, right? And if both people are in the room and you say to her, it sounds like you're really brave in being able to go past these kids, right? The other person is like, what do you mean brave? They're like 2 or 3 years old or whatever, right? And so that's something that could take the side of someone, especially if it's not based on something she specifically said. But it doesn't mean it's wrong.
I think she's
You're right.
I think she's happy, but we don't know what's bothering her at work. We don't know what love affairs have failed, why she's living alone, why music is so important to her. There's so much we don't know about her.
Mm-hmm. So, and those might be good questions to ask, right? You might ask, so what is it about music that's so important to you, right? Right, and that could lead to some more understanding between both of them and lead them to be able to come up with solutions that they may not otherwise have come up with. Yeah. Okay.
Carolyn, I had another feeling I think she has, and that's one of fear. I
Mm.
know unsafe is there, but the statement that she can't even walk outside of her own house without feeling that she's walking through a minefield. And to me, that's fear.
Yeah.
And that she almost tripped over some toys, and almost broke her neck. So I
Yep.
think she's fearful when she comes outside.
Yeah. That makes sense. And some really clear things that she said that point to that. All right. What about topics? Let's move to topics. I'm going to take us back just a little bit to look at that topics grinder. Maybe. There we go. So remember, we want topics to be 1 or 2 words. It has to be something that was talked about having conflict around this specific thing. So they said that this is something they're having conflict around. It is specific or concrete. It doesn't blame anyone, does not take anyone's side, and does not set up a yes, someone should, or no, someone shouldn't. So we'll go back and let's see if I can put this like off to the side so we can still kind of see it. Kind of. Can folks see that? Or does it just cover everything? Kind of. A little bit. Okay. So looking at the topics here, toys blocking the way. Does that fit as through this? Does that go through the topics grinder and make it out?
Nope.
So that has blame in it.
Okay.
So I would say toys outside the house or something, or in the driveway or something like that.
Yeah, just say shared space.
Okay. Does toys outside the house go through the grinder and fit the criteria?
No.
Okay, why not?
If you include toys, then you're always talking about the children. You're not talking about whoever, our lady here. Apparently she doesn't play with toys in the common area.
Okay, that's fair. So what might be something that would fit?
Could we say lawn? Because it seems to be, that's what it is. And then we could, as you ask the questions and then it's blameful. It applies to both of them.
Everyone can agree that the lawn is in discussion here. It is 1 to 2 words. It is specific or concrete. It doesn't blame anyone, doesn't take anyone's side, and does not set someone up for a yes, someone should, or no, someone shouldn't. So I think that works.
Could we use shared space?
I think that would also fit, right? 1 to 2 words. It's something they've talked about, specific or concrete. This is one where it might seem like it's not specific or concrete, but it might be specific enough for this situation. It doesn't blame anyone, doesn't take anyone's side, doesn't set up for a yes, someone should, or no, someone shouldn't. I think it works. So this would be a good one to check in with the participants, right? Where you might say, like, tell me a little bit more about this space outside, or tell me a little bit more about what the front of the house looks like. And then they might tell you, well, it's just a driveway and like there's really nothing else. Or they might say, yeah, it's a really gorgeous lawn and I've got all the space or whatever. And so then you might be able to pick out more specifically what would fit better for them and their circumstances.
What if you asked both parties, where's all this stuff going on? We've heard this scenario. Where's it all going on?
Yeah, that's a fair question, I think. And it gives them a chance to talk a little bit more about what this topic is.
Could one of the topics be police intervention, since the police were called?
Okay. So let's see, police intervention, it's 1 or 2 words. And she did talk about it. Is conflict around it? She says, then you call the cops and say I attack you. Could be. then is it specific or concrete? Fairly so. Does it blame anyone?
Yes.
It does blame. Yep. So maybe something else to address that. Because it needs to be addressed, right? It's part of this.
Outside intervention, instead of leave the cops out of it and just call it something else, some third party,
So let's go through. It's one or two words. It's something they've talked about. It's pretty specific for this situation. More specifics would be in an agreement. It doesn't blame anyone. It doesn't take anyone's side. Does it set up? I feel like it might not fit this one though, because it does kind of set up a someone should or no someone shouldn't
I
situation.
agree with that.
Okay.
I think it's more like lack of communication, and even though, as you said, that's a general term, but that they can't deal with this themselves. They have been unable to talk about the situation, it seems.
Okay. So could it be communication? It could be communication in general, or it could be something, this might be one where we want to be more specific, right? Is it communication about shared space or communication about differences of opinion or whatever, right?
Because you've got the children disrespecting her as well as the toys. So,
Okay. So there's communication between kids and adults. Okay, so I'm going to try to put those in there.
and between the adults as well, right? Communication between the adults. Yeah.
Okay. What do other folks think about that?
Well, it doesn't fit the topic's grinder and be grinded out.
Okay.
Because it's more than one or two words.
Are the children omitted as participants?
That's a good question. Do the kids need to be involved in this in order to talk about how they're communicating?
Right.
I would say no. It doesn't sound like it because I'm reading it. It doesn't sound like the kids told her anything. Their actions maybe what is fueling, and that's why she is addressing her concerns to their parent.
Okay.
To their mom. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like the kids did anything other than what kids do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So something about their actions was more likely to be what caused this. So maybe communication doesn't fit for the kids, but maybe between these two folks. In which case, since they're the ones there, maybe just communication would be enough as a topic for them, right? Okay, let's look real quick. We had the other one that we didn't address yet is children not listening, although that did just come up here, right? Lana, you said it's more about their actions than what they're saying necessarily.
Yeah, because to me, the kids are just being kids. She didn't say how old they were. You know what I mean? They were just, to me, they may just be playing and got carried away. Not mindful of where they're putting their toys or, that they're blocking. So, yeah.
And it may be that communication is enough of a broad topic for them to be able to discuss whatever there might be around that, as well as just the communication between each other. And then it's possible that shared space and lawn would allow the discussion of how the actions are being taken in those spaces. What do other folks think?
Carolyn, do you think there's something else going on? Because I'm just reading this sentence. In the beginning, she says, "It has been miserable living next door to you. You are unhappy." What not includes us in. So there may be other things going on behind the scenes that she has witnessed. Then she's saying she's uptight. I mean, duh, where does that come from? I mean, I can see the rude if she goes and tells her, she doesn't approve of how her kids use the shared space. And then she tells her your kids are out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really good. There are a lot of questions that still need to be teased out here, right? And a lot of things that have been said that maybe we need to get some more information before we really settle on what's the topic or what's the feeling or what's the value here, right? But from what she has just said here, you've already come up with some really great feelings, values, and topics that we can use in a reflection, right? You can say, wow, it really sounds like you've been feeling pretty miserable and even unsafe when it comes to the shared space outside of your home, and that you're looking for some safety, and also it's important to you to be able to have some peace and relaxation in your home. Is that right? And she'll be like, yes, or she'll be like, well, yes, but, and all of those are great. We want people to react in those ways. Okay, we've still got 20 minutes, and I have the other person now. Are we ready? Do we want to try the next person?
Sure.
Okay. Would someone be willing to read this person with some feeling? And I'm still here. I'm just grabbing.
I'll read it. You want me to read it?
Yes, please. And I can hear you. I'm just grabbing water. Go ahead.
Okay. Some garbage. It's obviously you're throwing garbage onto our lawn and then blaming my kids for it. We never had any problems until you moved in upstairs. Now suddenly there's trash in the lawn and you blame my kids. You play loud music late at night and keep my whole family awake way past bedtime. I can't even talk to you about any of it because you just start yelling and scaring the kids, and me too. I am a single parent. I don't know what you're going to do next. How am I supposed to protect my kids? They can't even play outside without getting yelled at by you. They are so scared of what you're going to do that sometimes they run inside in the middle of a game when you come home. What happened this time was the last straw. You yelled at my kids and then pushed them out of the way because they weren't moving fast enough for you. And then you started to yell at me saying that I'm being a terrible parent. So yes, I lost it. I yelled at you. And I told you never to lay a hand on my kids again. Then you pushed me out of the way. So yeah, I called the police and then they didn't do anything. I love to role play, by the way.
Thank you. You did great. Okay. There we go. Now I brought it back up. All right. So what are we seeing here?
Anger.
Hey.
Carolyn, I think Phyllis had a kind of a process question.
Yes.
Writing down feelings and topics, during the session. Was that your question, Phyllis?
Yeah, whether you, as that goes on, I mean, you're not going to have a paragraph to reflect back on, to look at. So do you write possible feelings, values, as the conversation proceeds? Or do you take time, they finish their initial statements or something, and then you go through this?
I think that, so I can tell you what I do. And of course it's going to be whatever works for you, right?
Right.
I like to take a bunch of notes. It helps me focus and to keep my hands busy and to write things down. So when I'm taking notes, I will have, like, if there's two people, I'll just split the paper into two, and I'll write for their name at the top of each side, and I'll just keep a list of like feelings or values or like a specific phrase that I maybe not sure about, but I know I want to come back to and maybe think about a little bit more. And I'll just be scribbling all this stuff on the two sides. And then I also usually will circle specific words as I get confirmation, like, yes, that is what they said they feel, or that is the value that's important to them, so that they pop a little bit more for me. And then as we get closer to the point of maybe coming to some kind of agreement, then I get really specific about putting a topic that fits for everyone, assigning values for each participant around that topic based on what I've already been scribbling down on my notes, and the feelings that they have around that. And the reason I'm very careful about this part is because when we do get to agreement writing, I can say, so it sounds like these are the topics. And it sounds like for you, participant one, around this topic, this and this are really important to you, and it sounds like you've been feeling this and this around that. Is that right? And they'll say yes. And then the next person, because at this point you've already done these reflections before, so you're really just checking in to make sure that you've got it now all correct, right? And you do the same with participant 2. It sounds like with this topic you've been feeling this way, and having this and this is really important to you. And then you can say, if you were to get your needs met, if you were to get value and value met, and you were to get value and value met around this topic, would this topic be resolved? And if you've gotten all of their values around that topic, they're probably going to say yes. And what's nice is if you have this written up, like all the topics written up, you can then also ask them, once you've gone over that and made sure you have the right values for everyone, you can say, if we were to find a resolution around each of these topics, would this conflict be resolved? And that's when they can say yes, or they can say, well, actually, what about this? Well, what about the toys? And you can say, like, well, I think that might fit here under shared space. Does that sound right to you all? And they'll be like, oh, yeah. No, that's right. That's good. That's good. Or they'll be like, nope, actually, that doesn't fit that because they actually do this or whatever. And then you get back into some more. But the point being, identifying those values around each of those topics, that's what's going to make sure that you are addressing those in the agreement. Because then you go into each topic individually, you can say, you said that cleanliness was really important to you. What are some ideas you have to get that cleanliness around shared space? Or what are some ideas that you have in order to make sure that so-and-so is getting the cleanliness they need around that shared space, or the safety that they need around that shared space, that sort of thing. And it can help them come up with ideas specific to the values they're saying that they need.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Can you be doing that evaluation of all your notes and put them in a caucus environment, or you do it as a group?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I'm just saying is when reviewing your notes and trying to come to a resolution and get confirmation from the individuals, is there any value to do any part of that in a caucus environment where there's perhaps some candor that there might not be in a group setting?
I prefer to do it when they're all together. That's my preference. Because I think it's important for each side to hear the values of the other person, as well as the feelings that they might have around that. Because
I'm just thinking that any vulnerabilities that any concession that they be reluctant to make.
So hopefully by this point, there's enough trust built around folks that they should be able to say that. I would say if you're still seeing that they're not ready to speak openly, then that might be something you need to explore in caucus, right? Because then that's a safety issue. They're not feeling safe enough to speak openly. But otherwise, it should be, I think it's more valuable for them to be able to have that conversation all in the same space. Especially like in this case, right? Safety is very important to this person, participant 1. But if the other person doesn't hear the reflection about it, sounds like safety is really important to you, and you've been feeling unsafe and worried about your physical health when it comes to walking up to your home or whatever, the other person might not have heard all of that and might just be like, they're just overreacting again. That's just what they do. But when they sit there and they have to hear that person and they hear you reflect to them that safety is important to them and they're feeling unsafe, it allows them to be a little bit more empathetic than where they might not have been if they didn't hear that happen in front of them. Phil?
There's a guy, I wanted to respond to Phyllis and how to do this, sort of. There's a guy named Douglas Noel who's done an enormous amount of work in prison systems, especially, I guess, in California. And he is an advocate for listening for emotion and identifying them directly. So if, as Carolyn said, she's taking notes, feverishly taking notes, if you're listening for the emotions that you hear expressed, like anger, like frustration, like insecurity, like defensiveness. You can take those emotional things, and I guess those kind of translate into topics. Maybe values are better. But if you can do that, if you can get a list of things that you hear, then you can reframe that and say, okay, you're angry, you're defensive, you are frustrated, you are you feel unsafe. Then you can start to distill those kinds of things down. That's a way of dealing with the fact that you don't have this wonderful paragraph written out for you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. The feelings will often point to a value that they feel is either missing or that they are really wanting to have. Go ahead, Kathy.
So I just noticed in both participant 1 and participant 2, they're both feeling unsafe. So it seems to me you have something then that you can talk about, right? And are you looking for those convergent things, right? How does that help you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we've probably all seen cases where folks will be saying things and then you realize they both want safety here. They both want this out of it, right? Which is wonderful because that's a place where they can kind of at least see the humanity in the other person. Like, oh, I want safety too. I didn't realize they were feeling unsafe because I was feeling unsafe. And I think it's also important when you're looking at this and you're assigning the values to the topic, when it comes to like communication, let's say, they might both be feeling unsafe, but in this case, communication, one person is feeling unsafe around communication, the other person is feeling unsafe around the shared space, right? The like physicality of the shared space, the toys. So the value might be the same, but it's around two different topics, which is an important thing for us to realize, because if we start saying, well, how do you feel safe around communication? Participant 1 might be like, no, I don't feel unsafe around that. I feel unsafe because of the toys. So it's just something for us to keep in mind. I don't know if I'm agreeing with you, Kathy. Did someone else have their hand up? Okay. All right. So with feelings, so we've got anger. What specifically did they say that pointed to anger for you? And anyone can answer. Or if you have other feelings or other values or topics, go ahead and throw those out.
Well, she says she lost it. I yelled at you.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. And
Reddit
that,
put something in chat.
oh, thank you. Vulnerability, scaring the kids and me too. Yep. And pushed me. So maybe feeling vulnerable.
It's kind of interesting because I'm sensing the same feelings on both sides. And, just I'm wondering, when one is saying it in a, maybe in a safe environment, and then the other one is saying the same thing, what is it doing to them?
What is it doing?
I don't know.
Go ahead.
No, in an ideal world, they'll get up and hug each other. I'm sorry.
That would be great.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's probably just escalating things, right? One person feels unsafe, then the next person feels unsafe, then one person feels vulnerable, and it just kind of keeps like stacking and stacking and stacking. And this is where I think us being able to do these reflections to folks directly and while everyone is there together, that's where we really can create that magic of allowing folks to hear what the other person might be saying. Because I think something that happens a lot too is we get into an argument or in conflict with someone and we stop being able to hear them because we're so wrapped up in what we're feeling or what we think is important. or what we think should be done, what our ideas are, that we have a hard time hearing the other person. When someone different comes in and says, it sounds like you're feeling vulnerable and angry about these things, right? It can help us be a little bit more open to hearing that.
So, Carolyn, I know I've done mediations where at the end I can feel like one person really didn't hear the other person. They really didn't listen. And you can, I'm assuming if you reflect well enough, that they do hear it, but maybe they just don't. And I don't know what you do in a situation like that.
I think that that might be our own, because I do that. I have that feeling too, right? And I think that could be our own desire to see them understand each other as an outcome. And it may be that that's not what they need as an outcome. What they need is they just need to have their values addressed so that they can live comfortably within those values, whatever that might be. And it might not be that understanding the other person is just that important to them. And for our purposes, they only need to understand each other enough to address the values in a way that feels good for both people, that meets their needs. That's it. Any other things that are coming out for folks here? Let me check the time too. Oh, okay, we're at 4 minutes, so I'm going to stop. Okay, so I'm going to look back real quick at the topics that we had identified here: communication, shared space, and lawn. If we address those here, does that seem like things that would fit for this person as well?
Yeah, as
Yeah.
long as we can say that the garbage this person is upset about is part of the lawn.
Right, right. And it might be, that could be, right?
Or not.
Or not. Maybe that's something else we need to explore and figure out what we're going to pick there. That's a good question a good area to go into more questions. Okay. Yes, Greta.
We were thinking of shared space as being the outside space, but it's clear from participant 2 that she also wants her inside space to be addressed. And the fact that there's noise coming from above.
Thank you. Yes. And we might be tempted to call it noise as a topic, but that's going to blame one person versus the other, right? So it could be anything else. Maybe it's music, or maybe it's I don't know. You would have to talk more with the participants to get specifics on what would work there as a topic.
Gotta have more white hair than I normally do. Yeah.
Yep. So my favorite thing about this exercise, and anytime you do this kind of work, right, practicing the reflective listening, is, as we noticed, we were picking some stuff out that we were assuming about the participants. And we always do this. Like, I don't think there's anyone I know that has gotten to like the level of nirvana where they can only address what folks have been saying and not put their own ideas or biases on it. So it's really helpful to practice this with videos or with your family members or with your friends, and just try to do some of that practicing so that you start picking out like, oh, I do tend to kind of assume this about folks when they do this or when they say this. And that can help us be better facilitators, better mediators, but, also just better people.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. That was really, really wonderful and so helpful. You are a treasure for the DRC. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And really nice to see some new names. Lana, I don't think I've met you. And Janine, I don't think I've met you either, but welcome, welcome. And hi, Lana. Nice
Hello.
to see you with that. Yeah. So, any final comments before we say goodbye for the afternoon here?
One of the to kind of talk about what Carolyn, how do you practice? And I hate to do this because I'm not plugging Douglas Knoll, but one of the exercises that he offered was listen to television commercials for the emotions that you hear and make a list. And they can, emotions, no, they can be both negative and positive. Listen to, and they're like these little vignettes that we had. They take 60 seconds or so, and there's stuff in there that you can pick out. And I tried it, and I don't know if it made me any better mediator, but it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun too. Yeah, that's good. Commercials, like TV, a lot of dramas will have like a really good vent in them where you can like, rewind. But I also I started doing this one-on-one with a volunteer, and I really appreciated being able to like go through and really nitpick and be like, well, why did we pick that word? Or why did you pick that word? Or why did I do this? Or why do that? And it really helps kind of to have a partner to kind of go through and just question each other and force each other to really think about why you're picking those words. Because we don't do that in mediation, right? If we were to sit there in mediation and be like, well, exactly what did they say that made you think that? That would be awful. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be second guessing ourselves constantly when we're actually there. But when we're practicing, that's the perfect time to do it.
Don't do it with your partner at home because they really don't appreciate it.
That's true. You know who's really good at this though is kids. So if you have any like kids in your life, it's a fun game to play with them. You give them a sheet of paper that has a list of feelings and values and stuff and just be like, what do you think? And they're awesome at it.
Well, I would say that the topic that brought me down here felt a lot like it was going to be a visit to the dentist's office, but it got much better as the day went along. Thank you.
I'm glad.
That's high praise, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. I'll send out the presentation, a follow-up email later this afternoon, and also there'll be the link to the evaluation survey that I also sent out already. But if you could give us some feedback, that would be great. And happy Halloween and happy Thanksgiving, because our next session won't be until December. So thank you again, Carolyn, so much appreciated, and hope to see folks soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.